will be much better. It will ameliorate the climate and restore, not greatly, but nevertheless, trust, the atmosphere of trust. And certainly there should be reciprocal measures from Pyongyang and Seoul and from Pyongyang and Washington to commit themselves not to just exercise military might, like launching ballistic missiles, like exploding nuclear devices, like not sending strategic heavy bombers and ceasing large-scale military maneuvers and exercises. But how to make courage? Who will be the first? You could ask me. The strongest side should make the first step forward, not the weakest.
Roy, your chance.
The United States really ought to consider a brand new style of diplomacy as it pertains to North Korea. I think that's encouraging. It's matched on the other side, though, by those calling for very tough, even tougher sanctions and even more deterrence. And so those two somehow have to be figured out over time.
Victoria, one more question from the young scholars here.
Thank you. So you've been all talking so far about really deadly things, really something that can set the world on fire, Korean Peninsula, and probably interactions like how Filipino residents form relations with China can influence. But I think this is a question to all of you. Do you think this is the kind of the root cause of the problem of the Asia-Pacific, or would you look deep into it? What actually, in your view, poses the biggest threat to Asia-Pacific order? What realm does it lie in? Is it some country or some system or group of countries or whoever else wanting to have preferable positions over the others? Or is it some kind of systemic deficiencies in Asia-Pacific region? And if the problems that are caused as a result of, this systemic breach actually causes the problems of the regional or global level. And in addition, with the dessert for Philip, how you see the role, with all those questions relevant for you as well, of Great Britain and all of that after Brexit and the change of government and its, AIOB entrance counter to U.S. wishes. Thank you.
Shall I start with?
Yes, Philip,
I'll start with Britain and Brexit, because that's an easy one. Sometimes nations do really stupid things, and Britain has just done a really stupid thing by trying to leave its own continent and thereby diminishing its own political and economic power. So that's straightforward. I think on your question about where's the real tension in this region, the tension arises, for me, from the fact that the geopolitical facts have changed. In East Asia, for a long time, America was the preeminent power. China was, relatively speaking, weak. We now have a strong China seeing for itself a global role and obviously seeking primacy, if you like, in its own regions, because that's what great powers do when they emerge. So you have this collision between China's ambitions and the US view that things have been fine up to now, so why should we change them?
So practically you're saying a geopolitical rivalry of the 19th century type in Asia-Pacific.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing.
In fact, in the Asia-Pacific area, in my understanding, there are 4 major areas where we have a conflict, or potential friction and conflict between the United States and China. The divided Korean Peninsula, Diaoyu Island, Taiwan Strait, and South China Sea. I wonder if anyone from young scholars here sitting in front of me can raise a question and direct a question to one of the panelists here.
Alessia, I have actually a question because I wanted to try to widen the discussion. It would be very much focused on the US and China relations, but I think across Northeast Asia in particular, we've got a number of relationships that are quite important. Coming to one of the questions you raised about the East China Sea and the territorial maritime disputes. I think there is a very interesting moment in the Japan-China relations. They have been going through definitely 2012, 2014, a period of rocky relationship. But it seems to me now that there is the beginning of a renewed sort of, from both sides, attempt to increase the dialogue and put in place a number of communication mechanisms to allow for the two sides to avoid unintended consequences to frequent encounters that happen at sea. So my question to Mr. Cabinet General Yao, what is your expectation in terms of the future of Sino-Japanese relations on the back of what we've discussed so far as a change in dynamics between the United States and China and therefore sort of the regional balance? Thank you.
Shall I answer immediately? Yes, I think the China-Japanese relations is also a very one of the most important bilateral relations, and it has been in the low for the last 4 years. It has been at the lowest, almost at the lowest, since the two countries established diplomatic relations. Starting from the end of 2014, we have seen a slow upward path that China-Japan relations is improving very slowly, but it's improving, and there have been several rounds of talks on establishing what you described as CBM measures, including setting up of hotlines, setting communication, and also rules of the road between the navies, the coast guards, and the air forces, and also regular dialogue mechanisms. So I think that the general trend is to improve the relations, but we still have many issues. The most recent issue is that Japanese government official, high-ranking official, have made a remark at CSIS in DC, Washington DC, saying that Japanese Navy would like to join the training cruise jointly with the United States, and we still want a clarification on that.
One more question from
Let me come in here.
Victoria.
We are talking about future of Asia. Let me bring here India in. India and China have their mutual concerns about maritime security issues, increasing India's influence in South China Sea, as well as Chinese increasing presence in Indian Ocean. Recently, both the countries have started maritime security dialogue, but it's very basic. What would be your suggestion to increase maritime cooperation between India and China?
Actually, I don't see much conflict of interest in maritime areas so far as China and India are concerned. We have a border dispute, and we have maybe an issue on our relationship with Pakistan. Pakistan has been an all-weather partner for China, but a Pakistan-Indian relationship is complex. So I think so far we don't have much conflict and interest conflict, and we are already having kind of Navy joint Navy operations in the Gulf of Aden, and to protect sea lanes of communication under the UN mandate. And I think if we are going to expand it, we can have HADR, we can have search and rescue, and also maritime environmental protection.
Japan promised to join the joint patrol in the South China Sea. President Duterte promised to lead a retreat from the joint patrols. Now, do you think China could go as far as to accept the alleged joint patrols by Australia, Japan, and the United States in the South China Sea?
China has persistently said it will not accept the arbitration result. So whatever the other countries' players say, it has no effect. It will have no impact on China's position.
Now, do you think, excuse me, Your Age, do you think the Japanese government will go ahead, despite the fact that President Duterte, the newly elected leader of the Philippines, refuses to be held hostage by the maritime dispute in the South China Sea and wants to come to China as an official, a state visit, the highest level of treatment by the PRC? And under this circumstance, Tokyo still wants to go ahead at the risk of undermining seriously the already very fragile Japan-China relationship.
First, I have to correct what you said, that Japan promised to join patrol, to conduct a joint patrol in South China Sea. I think you are referring to the statement by the Defense Minister Inada, but what she said was not that she promised to conduct a joint patrol with the United States in South China Sea, but she just said that Japan will continue to exercise joint training, naval joint training with the United States in South China Sea, which is not new. You know, in terms of naval activities in South China Sea.
Actually, she used the term joint training cruise in
Yes,
South
yes,
China Sea.
yes, there has been already done a number of joint cruise, including what we call Pacific Partnership, which is a humanitarian purpose to deliver, provide medical services to the countries in the region. But it's totally different from freedom of navigation operation. For now, Japan does not have any plan at all to conduct the FONOPS along with the United States in South China Sea. Because if Japan conducts the FONOPS in South China Sea, it's been perceived in Japan that PLA Navy will conduct a similar operation around Senkaku. And then that will cause Japan to call what we call maritime security patrol, which requires Japanese maritime self-defense force to also go into 12 nautical miles from Senkaku. And that will present a possibility where Chinese Navy ship and Japanese maritime self-defense force, cruise side by side and could cause a crash. So that's the last thing Japan wants. So Japan will never, at this moment at least, Japan doesn't have any plan at all to conduct the FONOPS. And so China doesn't have to worry about
Japan
it.
should be afraid of Chinese PLA Navy conducting freedom of navigations not in Diaoyu Island, but in Okinawa territory waters, your territory waters from Okinawa.
Okay, I'm concerned now.
Because FONOPS is not in disputed, not only in disputed islands, it's in established territory waters.
Okay, a question. One more question from the young scholars here, preferably. Baloy.
Yeah, because the Philippines and President Duterte are mentioned many times in this discussion, I am forced to say something. First, the international arbitration. It is only binding between the Philippines and China. But because China rejects the result of the arbitration, President Duterte is pursuing a more pragmatic approach to handle the situation, because this arbitration decision is not self-enforcing. We cannot enforce it alone. We need the cooperation of China. So we want to repair damaged political ties with China in order to advance our interest in the area, because of the realization that the Philippines cannot advance its interest if China remains to be adversarial to the Philippines. So we need to repair these damaged political ties, and that will be done in his visit to Beijing next week. And what Philip said is music to my ear, and that is to see the Philippines being friends to both superpowers. And I think that is good for the region. But I would like to ask Roy, since in theory, the essence of the alliance is always directed at a common threat. Since we are defending China, we're losing a threat. So do you think that will call for a rethinking of the security alliance, since we want to befriend China and we cannot afford to treat China as an adversary? So do you think that will call for a rethinking of the alliance? And to Dr. Kato, what do you think about this, that there is really a seriousness on the part of the current government to pursue friendlier, warmer ties with China? and at the same time embrace this friendship with Japan. So are you happy to see the Philippines having this warm ties with China and rethinking the alliance with the United States?
The U.S.-Philippines alliance well predates the emergence of China as a military power. And so I think it'd be mistaken to say that it exists to contain or defend against China. Is there a need to reevaluate the basis on which it exists? I think that probably is worthwhile, and a new American administration may well undertake that initiative. It's important to note at the outset, I also noted that the United States does not mind important and strengthened relations, does not oppose, in fact encourages the emergence of stronger Philippine-China ties, as well as Philippines-Russia.
Right. So it seems we hear more tough voices from the Pentagon and less voices from the State Department or those think tanks that call for peace and stability. Is this true? I mean, do you think the White House in the second term of the Obama administration has been held hostage by the hawkish concerns from the military?
No, but I think your first statement is worth understanding and analyzing. The State Department has been very involved, but a lot of its priorities have been in the Middle East, and so it's not to say it's disengaged from the region, but if you were to look at the level of activity that Secretary Kerry has been involved in, the vast majority of
Secretary Ashton Carter says recently that the pivot to Asia has entered into the third stage. What does that mean, Vladimir?
It would mean that the number of SSBMs and the number of SSGMs, strategic submarine ballistic nuclear in the first case, and strategic submarine guided nuclear, guided cruise missiles, will be much higher than in the Atlantic Ocean. The number of BMDS installations of the United States will be proportionally higher than in Western Europe or in the Atlantic Ocean, I mean on board Aegis-capable ships. But I would like to ask a question. Probably it would be quite unusual thing, but I would like to ask a question to our esteemed colleagues. How many military bases the United States of America has in Japan and in South Korea? Because you know your land much better than me. Could you please reveal this state secret for the audience? And I will ask...
George?
Okay, sorry?
How many military bases do you have in Japan
Maybe,
that are supported by the United
I
States?
really don't have the statistics right
lot.
now.
Nearly 100, sir.
Let's say a
I
lot.
will tell you. Nearly 100.
It's a lot.
Combined.
So,
And
Tell the exact figure.
It's a lot.
so what's wrong with
Tell
that?
the exact figure.
What's wrong? Let me ask you a question. Fundamentally, by the end of the day, who is the enemy of your Japan-US security pact? Who is the enemy? Now, if you, with the end of the Cold War, and with Russia and China are the enemy of your treaty military alliance, right?
Whoever intends and actually does invade Japan will be, or pose a threat to Japan.
But at the same time, in sharp contrast, Moscow and Beijing have made it very clear over and over that we would have a strategic partnership instead of a military alliance. In sharp contrast, you guys have the military alliance, a legacy of the Cold War. Does it mean that you have the Cold War mentality?
I don't think Japan has ever, Japanese government has ever stated that either China or Russia is enemy of Japan. I don't think so. I think that's a total misunderstanding or your anticipation.
Go ahead with your question.
Quick question for Roy Kamphausen. Brought up the issue of the upcoming U.S. election. I'm wondering, with respect to the South China Sea and the positive developments that we've seen in the region, at least in the short term, in terms of China-Philippine dialogue and also some of the agreements reached between ASEAN and China, what advice you'd have for the next administration in terms of how it should undertake its South China Sea policy and the extent to which there might be changes from what the Obama administration is doing?
There's a fundamental rethink of many elements of U.S. national strategy, and so I've got to believe that reevaluating the approach, the
the United States has taken over the last several years in the South China Sea would be one of those dimensions. Without predicting a winner, one of the candidates was actually the principal author of the so-called pivot or rebalance, and so were she to become president, I suspect that there would be a lot of continuity, even in the case of a reevaluation. What has changed, of course, in the intervening years are a number of factors. The reclamation of islands and emplacement of, in some cases, military assets on some of those. It's not a very large number. I think we need to be fair and understand that the number of islands is really a fraction of those in the rest of the Spratlys. But the other thing that's changed is the arbitral ruling and the changing relations between several of the countries and the work towards on the code of conduct. All of this has to fit together into a coherent whole, and I'm pretty confident that a new administration would do that.
Liu Lin, your question. Go ahead.
Thanks. This is a follow-on question about the U.S.-Philippine alliance. Because I noticed that, in fact, it seems that the U.S. Influence or control of its alliance partner seems to be decreasing. Sometimes the alliance partners will do something that the U.S. is unexpected, such as the Duterte's policy judgment and things like that. Even Japan, I think, they are doing, maybe they are strengthening U.S.-Japan alliance, but they are doing this also out of their own interest, I think. So how do you manage the military alliance nowadays? I wonder if Duterte continues his policy trend, will the U.S. just wait and see and do nothing, or the U.S. will do something to save this alliance relationship? Because as I see, the Philippines is a very important strategic partner for the U.S., especially in carrying out the balanced to Asia policy.
The way America's alliances work is not that Washington issues orders and the alliance partners do what they're told. That's not how it works. And I'd ask our two representatives from Japan and South Korea to offer their perspectives. What security specialists in China and elsewhere don't recognize is the enormous amount of time and effort that's involved in alliance management. These are essential relationships for the United States, and the amount of engagement with alliance partners is just difficult to imagine how much it involves. Think, for example, at the Shangri-La Dialogue this year, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, in a quickly or recently modified speech, failed to mention our alliance partner in the Republic of Korea. Mr. Chung can talk to the turmoil that caused within Seoul and elsewhere. It was completely inadvertent. It was not intentional. It was not trying to convey a message to Seoul. It was a speech that was rewritten at the last minute, and you could say carelessly, and that would maybe not be wrong, but in any case, it was a mistake. Countries that don't have those kind of relationships don't have to worry about somehow carelessly insulting an alliance partner and then having to make it up.
Vladimir?
Yeah, why some nations, some countries are debating this idea of the South China Sea, artificial islands, etc., etc. Because of quite a simple thing. They would like to create inferiority complex inside the peoples of Republic of China, inside the leadership of the People's Republic of China. Because it's very easy to manipulate a country who is being sent in the corner and is supposed to justify its position, its stance.
Thank you very much. General Yao, you'll be the last to bring this wonderful panel discussion to a close.
Yeah, and I know I have only 1 minute. I think that Victoria had raised a very good question. That is, one is
most important thing to do to address the security concerns of all the relevant parties in this region. I think the most important thing to address is the strategic architecture. Leaders of great powers should go beyond their bilateral issues and look forward and invest more in long-term interest, in longer-term interest. And currently, the security architecture in Asia Pacific were featured by U.S. military alliances, the 5 U.S. military alliances, and I hope the next president, herself or himself, would spend more time in considering how to bring China into this already existing security architecture, which had for decades excluded China. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we have all been able to benefit enormously from the dynamics of this wonderful and fruitful brainstorming session, a very important part of the conclusion of the Xiangshan Forum here in Beijing. I thank you again for your participation, your wisdom and time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
CCTV News is now recruiting. Join us in our state-of-the-art broadcast center in the heart of Beijing. We'd like to hear from TV professionals who want to grow their careers as we grow the channel. A full listing of available positions can be found at our social media links. Resume, clips, and writing samples should be sent to internationalhr@cctvnews.ca.